Hi all. Today we'll be learning about spectrum analysis. A spectrum analyzer measures the magnitude of an input signal versus frequency within the full frequency range of the instrument. So basically, what is a spectrum? Spectrum denotes different frequency components which are present in an input signal, right? So spectrum analyzer is actually used to measure the magnitude of the different frequency components which are present in an original signal. So here the primary use is to measure the power of the spectrum of known and unknown signals. The input signal that most common spectrum analyzers measure are electrical in nature. So however, spectral compositions of other signals such as acoustic and pressure waves, optical light waves, etc. can also be considered through the use of an appropriate transducer. Spectrum analyzers for signals such as light, called optical spectrum analyzers, are also available, which use direct optical techniques such as monochromator to make measurement. By analyzing the spectra of electrical signals, the dominant frequency, power, distortion, harmonics, bandwidth, and other spectral components of an input signal can be observed and measured, which are not easily detectable in the case of time domain waveforms. So what we actually do is convert the original time domain waveform or signal into frequency domain, so that different frequency components or the different components of the input signal having varying frequency can be identified and measured. These parameters, for example, dominant frequency, power, distortion, harmonics, etc., are useful in the characterization of electronic devices such as wireless transmitters. So here the frequency of different components in the signal appears on the horizontal axis, and the amplitude corresponding to each specific frequency is displayed on the vertical axis. To a casual observer, to a normal observer, it looks like a oscilloscope. So in fact, you should understand that a spectrum analyzer can also be used as oscilloscope sometimes. Most spectrum analyzers offers the opportunity to set a start, stop, and center frequency. Center frequency is halfway between the stop and start frequencies and is also the axis for the frequency used to determine the span or the range between the start and stop frequencies. What is the use of a spectrum analyzer? Spectrum analyzers are used to examine the frequency spectrum of RF as well as audio signals. These devices display individual elements of input signals as well as performance of the circuits which produces these signals. Through the use of spectrum analyzers, organizations can determine what modifications they might need to reduce interferences and thus help in the improvement of the performance of wireless routers, Wi-Fi systems, and other electronic equipments. With the help of an RF spectrum analyzer, the analyzer measures the radio noise floor. That means it measures how close two signals can be while still being resolved into two separate peaks. A spectrum analyzer can also be used to determine whether or not a wireless transmitter is working according to set standards. Output signals at frequencies other than the intended allowed bands appear as vertical lines on the display. A spectrum analyzer can also be used to determine the bandwidth of an analog or a digital signal. What are the features of spectrum analyzer? As the spectrum analysis software offerings have become more common, more analyzers are able to do ADC conversion and sample a significant input signal and frequency range. A modern spectrum analyzer may be able to show displayed average noise level, calculating average noise level detected by the device. These are capable of sample detection, peak detection, or average detection, all of these which can be used in the design and analysis of working of a proper electronic equipment. Types of spectrum analyzers. There are different types of spectrum analyzers available in the market. few of which are swept or super heterodyne frequency spectrum analyzer, FFT based spectrum analyzer, real-time spectrum analyzer, and audio spectrum analyzer. We'll move into the details of each of this construction and working of different types of spectrum analyzers in our next video lecture. Thank you.